Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Well, good morning, everybody out there in TV land. Welcome to another Sunday morning of Faith in Our Hometown. We're glad you joined us for another Sunday morning of conversation about things that I hope matter to us as people of faith and as just good members of the greater Joplin community. This morning, I'm having one of my friends on the show, which is, kind of good and scary all at the same time. But one of my coworkers is a religious sister, and her name is Sister Diane Langford, and she's going to be our guest this morning. And one of the things that I think that Diane has been so wonderful at in our own community at St. Peter's and with people throughout the years is helping them dig around in their spiritual lives. And I just thought it would be fun to have her on the show and let her talk about how she does that and helps people to do that for themselves. So we're going to be talking about finding interior peace, and that's going to be our topic for this morning for Faith in Our Hometown. So grab a cup of coffee, stick around, and we'll be right back after this Mercy Minute.
Blessings and greetings of mercy to you. My name is Anna Nichols. I am a Sister of Mercy and currently the leader of Heritage and Spirituality at Mercy International Association. I love the fact that sisters throughout time have gone where they have been called to go, and they have often picked up ministries that they never intended to pick up. 25 years ago, there were 22,000 Sisters of Mercy globally. Today we're down to about 6,200 with Sister Rock and some of the others. But despite the fact there are 6,500 or 6,200 sisters left, there is an amazing number of women and men of mercy who are working alongside us, and that continues to expand and expand, and for me that is incredibly exciting. So as far as National Catholic Sisters Week, I really look at the legacy that they have passed on and the fact that so many women, men, young people are living mercy today. That really is for me what's significant.
Well, again, welcome back to another Sunday morning of Faith in Our Hometown. My guest this morning, Sister Diane Langford. Diane, welcome.
Thank you.
I didn't know that was going to be the commercial this morning either. See, these things are beyond me. But I'm glad it was the commercial because I happen to have great respect for Catholic sisters. They helped raise me in my life. Now, you're not a Sister of Mercy, and I want to make that clear considering we just had that Mercy Sisters commercial. But you are a Sister of Divine Providence.
Excellent.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about, just a little bit about you and your community and how long you've been in the area, because, I mean, counting all your time in Neosho and all your time in Joplin, you've been around for a while.
I have. We're Sisters of Divine Providence of San Antonio. Our foundress came over from France in 1866 and began our community in Texas. And in these 100 and some years, we've been mostly in education. We have a university in San Antonio that we sponsor and a high school in San Antonio that we sponsor. And then there's people like me, the renegades, who work in parishes by ourselves because our foundress came from a community that lived that way in France, going to small towns and living with the people and doing what needed to be done with the people. So this is our heritage, and we're happy to do it that way. And when you say, well, Sister Diane, where's your community? They all live in San Antonio? I said, yes, most of them, except for you. My community are the people of St. Peter's Church.
Yeah. And you worked for many years down at St. Canaries in Neosho.
I was there for
Seneca,
7
Knoll.
years.
Yeah.
7 years down there under Father Jim Unterreiner and Father John Harth. And then I came back after I worked on a book and was living in Chanute, Kansas, and I came back to Neosho, finished that book, and ended up helping out at St. Canary. I never worked for them again, but I helped out.
Yeah. And then there was that fortuitous conversation that we had, so many years ago now, where I said, what are you doing? Or if you want, would you like to work part-time and come up this way?
I remember how you started that.
How did I do that?
You called me on the phone. I happened to be in Midland, Texas.
Okay.
And you wanted to know, could I do a retreat for teenagers?
Oh, and I remember
And I
that.
said, no, I don't speak teenage anymore. And then you said, how about adults? I said, we can do adults.
Yeah. There we
That
go.
was our beginning.
And that was the beginning. So yeah. Well, Diane, one of the things that I know happens at our place, and I just have watched your meditation group just kind of grow spiritually in leaps and bounds over the last few years, basically because they came together and learned to kind of just be in a different way. And that has been so beneficial in the lives of so many of our parishioners. And I would just love to, have our, our listeners, our viewers, just hear how all that came to be, because it really is. It's just kind of. I've just seen how much fruit it's borne in the lives of so many of our parishioners, and that's what I wanted you to come on and talk about today. So.
Okay. Well, that particular group began because a couple from St. Mary's Church, Doug and Liz Glenn, called me one day and asked if I could teach them how to meditate. And I said, well, yes, but I don't think that's the best plan. Because according to all those who really help us grow in that area of silent sitting or contemplative prayer or meditation, whatever you want to call it, they really emphasize how important it is to have a community to sit with regularly. And so I said, I think we need a group. And they said, well, that'd be even better. So we started with a very small group, but I asked my sister Regina, who lives in Tulsa, who facilitates 2 silent sitting groups, to come over and teach us how to do this. And she did, and we've been doing it ever since. This is, I think, starting our 5th year, coming up next year.
Yeah. And so this group started small. It continues to, and it's not like, hundreds and hundreds of people, but the group continues to grow because of the difference it's made in some people's lives. And again, they tell other people, and all of a sudden here comes another couple, and here comes this one, and all those kinds of things. So what does a silent sitting group do, or what does a meditation group do together?
Well, the first thing we start with is a reading of a meditation written by usually either Father Richard Rohr, Franciscan of Albuquerque, New Mexico, or Father Ron Rolheiser, Oblate priest of San Antonio, Texas. And
I'm just going to say for our viewers, these are probably 2 of the Catholic juggernauts in terms of helping produce spiritual reading material for a lot of Catholics. They're not everybody's, not everybody loves them, but there are people who read them all the time. Some people read them every day, but these are 2 of our people in cranking out Catholic spiritual reading for years.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we start with that, and I arrange this, and I always pick a meditation from one of those 2 people, which goes with the gospel of the next Sunday.
So the upcoming week.
Right. And we meet on Mondays, and it's the next Sunday. And so we hear the meditation, then we hear the gospel, and then we have a sharing. There's no debating.
Yeah.
It's Father Richard Rohr always talks about seeing and working non-dualistically. We have 2 black cups here.
Yes.
But one is partly filled and one is less partly filled. Are they equal? They're the same. You can drink out of yours, I'll drink out of mine, but they're the same. Or you can drink out of mine, I don't really care. But ideally, all of us get to where, as we work together in silent sitting, to where we see non-dualistically.
So in other words, instead of drawing and focusing on all the divisions between all of us and between other things, we have a tendency to see ourselves as part of the greater whole.
Yes, and this is very important when we talk about becoming a peaceful person,
Right.
full of peace. And so I like to think about this regular quiet time that we have collectively as being important, but the real important time is what each person of us does in our homes as our private prayer. I was just talking about this today, as a matter of fact, with the group. It's very important to realize that I am not God. Now, Father, I know that's a hard thing for you.
I struggle with that all the time, and you know that.
I know that, and I know it too, because I have an ego that's not quite as big as yours, but it goes there.
I'm glad you said it on the air, but go ahead, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So To really get into silent prayer means that you're not giving God your grocery list
Right.
in the first
Dear
thing
God,
this
God,
morning.
this is how I
And
want
I
you to
need
fix
all
the
this
world.
done by noon. We don't do that because we have no idea what God wants of us for the day, for the week. And I was telling them today, this idea of setting up a part of ourselves where God rests with us is the very important part of meditative prayer. And when God is resting in there, somebody would say, well, what happens? Well, nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing happens. Well, what did you do? I said, well, I didn't do anything. Well, how did you know? Well, I didn't know that God was going to set up an apartment in my house, my inner house, but then what happens is over time, something will happen and you'll say, oh, I know where that came from. I'll give you an example. Last September, I was down in the basement after coffee and donuts, and I was talking to a couple of ladies, and a lady came downstairs, the circular stairs, and she was carrying her little baby, and the baby was maybe 6 months old. And she said, she walked right over to me, and she said, Sister, would you hold my baby? Now, do I look like a baby holder? You can laugh. I know. I'm not a baby holder.
Right.
But she walked over and she gave me this baby. And I didn't even get a chance to say yes or no. She just put the baby in my arms. She went around to the kitchen and rinsed out a bottle and set it up again, and then came back and picked up her baby. And I said, that was a real privilege, thank you. But I thought about that all day long. Now, I've been doing silent sitting for about almost 20 years. And I thought, what did that mean? And we had just begun to have all this stuff happening in the church again around sexual abuse.
When the Pennsylvania report came out, yeah.
Exactly.
Right,
and
yeah.
I thought, what did that mean? And then I heard what God meant for me to know there. Diane, I still want you to take care of my people and their children.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so confirmed, but not about being better than anybody else.
Right.
It's like when you get a blessing like that, and I felt being blessed, the thing one has to do if one's going to be a quiet, peaceful person is they have to give it away. So the next night, that was a Sunday, the next night a friend and I were in Downstream Casino having supper. And these four couples were over here, not very far from us, and they ended up getting ready to leave, and I said, well, it's time for us to leave too. We had nothing to do with them. But then this man in the group got up, walked around the table, and I don't know if that woman was his wife or not, but he began plowing through her hair, like looking for nits. And she had that look on her face.
Yeah, I would.
It's
Somebody
like,
starts coming around messing with my hair.
what are you
Sure.
doing? And I caught her eye. And I looked across and I made a blessing sign.
Yeah.
And then I thought, oh my God, what have I done?
Yeah.
Because she may not be a Catholic. What are the odds that she was a Catholic? None. So in the end, I thought, oh my gosh. And then I hollered over, I'm a Catholic, that was a blessing.
Yeah.
Do you know, they were all Catholics, and they joined us, and we sat and had a great ending to our meal.
And it's hard to find straight Catholics in our area, I'll say. Well, my guest this morning is Sister Diane Langford, who is talking with us a little bit about the interior life and finding interior peace. We're going to be right back after a quick break. Don't go away.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service of Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Well, again, thanks for being with us for another Sunday morning here at Faith in Our Hometown. As we were discussing before the break, my guest, Sister Diane Langford, who is a Roman Catholic sister, works with us at St. Peter's. But one of the things I love that Diane gets to do is she gets to just help people stir around in their spiritual lives. And by telling stories like that and getting other people to notice what God seems to be doing with them when sometimes we have no idea what God is doing with us. But those are those moments that you just come to that, some of those, after you spend the time with God, you finally figure out what God was trying to tell you somewhere along the way. Yeah.
Right. I saw a PBS thing about 2 years ago where Aminata Forna talked about the importance of telling a story that happened to us. Because in the telling of our story, and it could be a simple story or it could be a complex one. It could be an old story or it could be a new one. But in the telling of the story, we get the grace that the story holds. Just like at Mass, where we get the grace, the story of Jesus and life and the way God blesses us through the Scriptures and the Eucharist, we get that by the telling of the story.
Right.
And so Aminata Forna talked about this, and I thought, this is so important, and that's partly what we do in the meditation group. People, we never ask anybody to, but if they feel called, they'll tell a story about what happens in their life when this or that or the other thing. And it's like it binds us all together. And so a part of becoming a peace-filled person is that you've got to take the bull by the horns and you've got to tell your story. Because otherwise your story will eat you up.
Well, and again, and by the very same token, especially if that story is, agitating you. If you don't share that story, you never get the energy taken out of it so that you can move on. But the same thing is also true when the story is not necessarily agitating you, but when it's been even more of a blessing by sharing the blessing.
Yes.
It again has its own blessing to it as the story is shared.
Absolutely.
And everybody, when people don't know what I do, Catholics call it preaching, but I just really, I think it's storytelling, personally.
And your story is always a little bit of a kernel in that.
Yeah. Because how else do I see
and
how the gospel has worked through me except
and
through
how
how
else
it's
do
flushed
people
through me?
how else do people see how the gospel is working in them?
Right. Because you got to model that for everybody.
You've got to model it.
Yeah. Well, see, I always tell people that preaching, is not storytelling is not rocket science. It's not like this, I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do to everybody on a Sunday. It's not. And I see the beauty of what you do as well. It's, as we're doing different pieces of the same mystery, obviously. But for me, that's the whole thing of just stepping back and saying, I'm just sharing my story and how the stories work for me. So the person I preach to, of course, on a Sunday morning is me.
I know.
I just let the rest of you listen in.
I know, and I help sometimes.
I know. Thanks be to God. Thanks be to God.
I was thinking of the coming up weekend's readings. We're on the beginning of Holy Week.
Well, yeah,
and so
we're actually going to air in June, but that's
well,
okay.
That's all right.
All right, but talk about Easter.
It's all mystical.
It's all good.
It's all mystical, and so there's no time.
Exactly. It's all good.
So Jesus is on the cross, and he says, "Into thy hands, O Father, I give my spirit." But what you don't know, what might have been said by God the Father to the Son is, hold my hand, because if you don't, you may go off here. You may not be able to stand it all the way through. And Jesus was a mystic. He was a silent man who prayed deeply.
Yeah.
And I think he could have heard God say that. Hold my hand so that you will be okay to the end of this. And Jesus says, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. So I think this is what's really going on with us as we learn to pray in silence. And as we become a peaceful person, peace-filled person, then it's amazing what happens. I used to hate going to my neighborhood Walmart store, but now I like to, because when I get out of the car, I think to myself, Diane, be the peace you have within you. And I go in, and people talk to me, and I remember saying this to one lady, do you know where the Jell-O is? And she said, no, I don't. But do you know where the peaches are? And I said, no, I don't. And so I found the Jell-O, she found the peaches, and we were friends at the end. And usually you would say, get me out of this store, I'm going crazy. But the great leveler is peace. And if I am a peace-filled person, I become the peace that I have within me, I'm a way nicer person. And people hand me their babies, amazingly so.
See, I'm used to getting handed the babies.
I know, because they think you're a daddy.
Yeah, I don't know. I just, but I always let the kid decide, you know?
I know.
always let the kid decide.
I know.
I hate it when somebody's trying to put a kid in my arm and the kid obviously does not want to come. And I'm like, no, they're fine. They don't want, they're not in the mood. They're not in the mood.
It's anti-event when you can't.
You know, as you're talking about that, just being with God, again, I think this is something I wish that, it taught us a lot in the seminary, but, that I just don't think they were really good about teaching us just how to be. I don't think they were very good at it. And I still don't think, and as much as I've worked with seminarians over the course of the last number of years, I don't think we're very good at teaching them how to be either. Somebody will ask, like, for example, I like to walk a lot when I'm just doing that. When I'm, now, and when I'm at the, the gym and just on a, treadmill or doing something, I'll read or do whatever. But when I'm just walking, especially when I go on retreat, I sometimes, I'll just stare at, I like to be near the water, so I'll just watch the water and I'll watch the waves and I'll do my thing. And somebody says, well, what were you, thinking about while you were, doing other prayer? And I said, nothing. And they're just like, what do you mean nothing? And I said, well, thoughts flew through my head, but but I wasn't concentrating on anything. I wasn't trying to solve anything. And so he says, well, but you said you were out there praying, and I'm like, yeah. And I said, well, how was that praying? And I say, well, it's real simple. I was looking at God, and God was looking at me, and what else did we need?
That was it.
I mean, I was looking at God, and God was looking at me, and that I don't need anything else.
Exactly.
And that to me is that that stumbling upon as time went on, that kind of just. I mean, now for me, it's kind of silent walking, okay, rather than silent sitting. But for me, that's really what does it, because those are those moments where I feel absolutely anchored into God, because I feel like I've been with God,
Right.
even if I don't, because I'm never going to understand Him. I mean, I will never.
No.
I will never make sense of God.
It can't be done.
And regardless of what's going on in my, whether I'm happy or sad or whatever, I like being with. That makes me feel better, regardless.
Well, a friend of mine in Tulsa, I saw her for the first time in a long time. It's been several years ago. And I said, Jenny, how are you doing? And she said, doing? I'm not a human doing. I'm a human being. I have never forgotten that, Father. And I think about it in terms of myself all the time. Am I just doing, and never being? Because the divinity of God that is within me is the being part of me.
Yeah.
And so if I'm not touching into that divinity, this whole thing is a sham.
Yeah. Well, and again, that's why I love my contemplative moments, and I try to get some of them daily. But I'm more successful when I'm actually away from here, because the being sometimes gets impeded by my doing. And that's why I love being on retreat, or I love being in the country, or just kind of again walking, even walking on the trail sometimes, by myself. Just and I'll greet people and do all those things, but I love it when I'm just kind of like just doing my thing and breathing. So if we got 2 minutes. If you were to just reach out into TV land and say, in 2 minutes, what wisdom can you give folks for trying to figure out a way to do this?
I think I'll give a little quote from Thich Nhat Hanh.
Okay, who is again a teacher of meditation.
He's a Buddhist
tradition,
priest,
right?
and an author. His book is called Being Peace, and if I have it right here, it'd be good.
Now, again, I will say that sometimes, Diane and I talk about this, and it's just like, I know I used to teach world religions, and some people would say, oh, you shouldn't quote those other people. And I'm like, if it's helping, why am I worried about, where it's coming from? I figure it's all coming from God anyway. Now, that's my way of looking at it, but that's kind of the way I settle. But
Well,
yeah.
and I'll say that too, because I think in the end, when we're all in heaven, we have to have something to talk about. What are we going to talk about if we aren't talking about this?
Yeah.
Thich Nhat Hanh says, if we are peaceful, if we are happy, we can smile, and everyone in our family, our entire society will benefit from our peace.
Mm-hmm.
We can't change all of the whole world, but we can smile and say, I'm going to be the peace I have within me today.
Again, good thoughts, good things to think about in terms of how am I going to be that peace that affects the world? Because again, I can't do that for anybody else, but I can certainly do it for me. And again, as I was going to say, peace and happiness are inside jobs. If we wait for somebody else to deliver them, it's never going to happen.
Forget it. Right.
Again, my guest, Sister Diane Langford. Stick around. We're going to be right back to close up for another morning of Faith in Our Hometown.
Lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer deaths in the U.S., and now we have an effective tool to screen for it. A low-dose CT uses a lower amount of radiation than a standard chest CT.
Breathe in.
Better detailed pictures than a chest x-ray of small abnormal areas of the lung. A person must be between 55 to 77 years old, asymptomatic, which means they don't have any symptoms such as coughing up blood, chronic cough, shortness of breath, unusual weight loss, or any other worrisome symptoms. They must also be a current smoker or have quit within the past 15 years, also must have a 30-pack year history or more, which equates to smoking 1 pack a day for 30 years, or 2 packs a day for 15 years. People generally avoid these scans, possibly due to fear of what could be found. Like many other cancers, if we can detect lung cancer early, it could be very treatable and life-saving.
Well, thanks for joining us again for Faith in Our Hometown. I kind of love sometimes these conversations that are just about who we are and how we think and how we process. And I thank my good friend, Sister Diane Langford, for being here this morning to kind of share with you all, like she usually shares with me, some things about the interior life. And it gets me stirring around in there and gets me to wonder, and helps me to share with other people my story about how I find some peace in the middle of this messy world of ours. Of course, everyone does it their own way, but it's grateful to have some people to walk with us on the journey and to help us to remind us of some of the things that really matter to us. So I'm just going to say to you, take a few deep breaths this week and maybe just try to be with your God, maybe just try to be. And we'll ask God's blessings on all of you for another Sunday morning. Come back and join us again next week for Faith in Our Hometown.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.